Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a video that I'm really excited about, and it's one that I've been thinking about and wanting to do and planning to do for a while now. I'm going to be talking about why sunscreen is so important based on science. If this is your first time watching my channel, thank you so much for watching. My name is Mina and I make videos related to beauty and skincare, so if that sounds like something you're interested in, please be sure to hit that subscribe button. So if you know me in person, I love science. I'm a big believer in the scientific process and research, and in this video I really want to take the time to explain and break down any misconceptions that people have about sunscreen and why you think you may or may not need it. I personally am a huge advocate for sunscreen. I think everyone should be wearing sunscreen every single day. The only exception I can think of is if you are working the night shift in a graveyard and then you're coming back home to sleep with blackout curtains. That is the only situation where you could get away with not wearing sunscreen. I did not come up with that myself, by the way. That was in Hiram's Q&A video a few weeks ago. Someone asked that and it sounded like it may have been a troll, but if indeed that was true, yeah, that person probably doesn't need sunscreen, but if you're watching this video, chances are you are not that person and you probably should be wearing sunscreen. So just a disclaimer before I get into it, I am not a medical professional or a doctor, and these are just my opinions. They do not substitute any professional medical advice. So if you have concerns, please make sure to go see your doctor. Okay, so first let's talk about why we need sunscreen. We need sunscreen to protect our skin from UV radiation. And there's multiple types of radiation that can affect our skin. So the sun puts out 3 types of UV rays. One is UVC, which is mostly filtered out by the ozone anyway, so we don't need to really worry about UVC radiation. The 2 we need to worry about are UVA and UVB. UVB rays penetrate closer to the surface of your skin, and these are the rays that could cause sunburn. UVA rays, on the other hand, penetrate deeper into your skin, and as a result, they can alter the cell's DNA at that level, so this can cause aging and, in the worst case, skin cancer. In addition to UVA and UVB, we have blue light that we are around all the time because I know we're all on our phones and our laptops and all our technology devices 24/7, so blue light is also something that can really stress your skin out. So UVA, UVB, and blue light. These are the 3 things we want to protect our skin from. And when we think about the natural pigment of our skin, so whether you have darker skin or lighter skin, if you have naturally darker skin, that means that your cells, your melanocytes, naturally produce more melanin. Melanin inherently protects pretty well from UVB rays, so remember UVB for burn, UVA for age, which is why people with darker skin tend to get sunburned less. So I personally have never had a sunburn. I don't think I ever will get a sunburn. I don't even know what a sunburn feels like, but I know they're painful and I'm sorry. So melanin protects pretty well from UVB. But that being said, melanin is not super protective against UVA. So this means that if you have darker skin, if you have more melanin, though you may be able to naturally protect yourself from sunburn, you may not be able to naturally protect yourself from the UV damage that causes aging. And if you're thinking, well, aging is fine, aging is a natural process, why do I care?
You know what? I love myself. Even though I look like a burnt chicken nugget, I still love myself.
Well, first of all, that is true, and that is very healthy and a great mindset that I wish was more popular. But more importantly, that means that melanin is not going to protect you from aging, but more importantly, melanin is not going to prevent you from getting skin cancer. And this leads me into my first point and my first myth that I wanted to dispel is that there's a common misconception that people with dark skin can't get skin cancer, and that could not be farther from the truth. The truth is that it is indeed very possible for people with darker skin to get skin cancer. While it is less common, when it does occur, it is much more severe and much more fatal because by the time it's detected, it's too late. It's diagnosed too late at a much more severe stage, and there's not much that can be done about it. So skin cancer can actually be much more aggressive and much more fatal in people of color. And I think one of the reasons for that is a lack of education and a lack of awareness about it, because the way skin cancer manifests in people of darker skin is different from that of people of lighter skin. So for example, the most common areas that skin cancer can form in people of color is the soles of the feet, the palms of the hand, and underneath your fingernails and toenails. And these are all places that people tend to miss and people tend to not think about because these are places that are not exposed to the sun. But once a growth or melanoma forms there, it can spread. It can spread and be much more aggressive into places that you may think to look at, and by then it may be too late. So this is definitely an issue that's not really explored enough, and there's actually an entire paper in the 2020 International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health about skin cancer in southern Africa, the risk factors, and what can be done from a public health standpoint to kind of educate people about the risks of skin cancer and what they can do to prevent it. The second myth is that people tend to think that sunscreen can cause vitamin D deficiency, and then that's cited as a reason to not wear sunscreen. Well, a group of scientists from the Australian National University did a literature review, and what they found is that many studies investigating the link between sunscreen and vitamin D deficiency were using artificially generated UV light. But when they did studies using real life settings, so when they went outside to get actual UV from the sun, they found little evidence that sunscreen hinders vitamin D production. So citing vitamin D deficiency is not a reason to say no to sunscreen. If you're really that concerned, you can take a vitamin D supplement, but sunscreen does not limit your vitamin D. So now that we've talked about why we need sunscreen and common myths about it, let's talk about what types of sunscreen you should be using. So as I mentioned, you should be using sunscreen every single day, even if you're not going outside, because even if you're sitting by a window, that is still UV that can penetrate your skin, and not to mention blue light that you're definitely going to be around even if you're indoors. And before I get into types of sunscreen, I want to make an important point. I don't know who needs to hear this, but if you are using a treatment without sunscreen, you are hurting your skin. You are hurting your skin. If you're using a retinol for anti-aging, or a vitamin C serum for brightening, or an acid for exfoliation, any type of those treatments, they work by getting rid of your dead skin, which at the same time makes your skin more sensitive and even more susceptible to UV penetration. So if you're using those things without sunscreen, you are hurting your skin. You are not helping. So please stop and don't use them until you can use sunscreen with them. And the second caveat to that is if you're using a moisturizer or foundation with sunscreen like SPF 15 or something, that is not enough. You should really be using a sunscreen on its own, on top of your moisturizer or underneath your foundation, because just think about the purpose of that product. The purpose is to provide moisture, or in the case of foundation, the purpose is to provide pigment. So if you think about the ratio of ingredients in those products, the focus is going to be on their primary purpose, the focus is not going to be on sun protection. So I hope that makes sense, but basically, using that is not enough. You should be using a sunscreen on its own. So that being said, there are two types of sunscreens you can use. There's chemical sunscreens and physical sunscreens, and they both operate completely differently. So chemical sunscreens sit on the surface of your skin and they absorb whatever UV penetration they're getting. So the UV rays are not really going anywhere, they're just kind of being absorbed and I assume broken down. So chemical sunscreens are a bit tricky, especially in the US, because there's been some shady stuff that has come out about certain ingredients. So there are 6 ingredients that are very frequently used in American chemical sunscreens, and a few of the very popular ones are oxybenzone, octinoxate, and avobenzone. I'm sure you've heard of those, or if you're using a chemical sunscreen produced in the US, that's probably what the active ingredients are. And the thing with these ingredients is that the FDA has conducted research showing that these ingredients, once you put them on your skin, they can be absorbed into your bloodstream and then they kind of remain in your body. On top of that, research done on mice and rats has shown that when these ingredients are absorbed into the bloodstream, they have caused damage to their reproductive systems and endocrine systems. So that being said, that was a study done on animals. It's not necessarily true that it applies to humans. And the FDA actually has this label called GRACE, and GRACE stands for Generally Recognized as Safe and Effective. These 3 ingredients and a few more that are most commonly used in American chemical sunscreens are not considered GRACE, so they're not really considered safe and effective. It doesn't mean that they're unsafe, it just kind of means that the jury is still out there and there's not enough evidence to say. It's kind of inconclusive. So if you ask me, I don't know. I don't know whether chemical sunscreens are good or bad, but the stuff that I have read definitely rubs me in the wrong way. Not to mention that I am allergic to them, so I probably wouldn't use them anyway. And if all this kind of goes over your head, another thing to mention is that Hawaii passed a law that prevents the sale of sunscreens with oxybenzone or octinoxate unless you have a doctor's prescription. And this is because these two ingredients are terrible for coral reefs. They're absolutely wrecking their ecosystems. So Hawaii decided to ban them altogether. So there's multiple environmental and physiological reasons to kind of steer clear of chemical sunscreens. I personally prefer physical sunscreens. Instead of absorbing UV radiation, they'll reflect it. So there's no way it's actually getting into your bloodstream. And in general, these are safer alternatives and they're better for sensitive skin. The only downside is that a lot of these physical sunscreens, at least in the US, they contain titanium dioxide and zinc oxide, which are actually safe. They are certified GRACE from the FDA, but they can leave a white cast. So if you have darker skin, I know the feeling. It's so annoying and so difficult to find sunscreens that don't leave a white cast. So I know it can be really annoying if you have darker skin, but if you can find a physical or mineral sunscreen that doesn't leave a white cast, find one that works for you and then stick with that. One tip for doing that is trying to look in the Korean market. I'm currently using the Crave Beauty Beach Shield, which I love. It does not leave a white cast. The Korean beauty industry will have a lot of sunscreens that are especially good for people of color. So whatever sunscreen you decide to use, make sure that it is broad spectrum. So that means that it's covering both UVA and UVB radiation. And make sure that you're using at least SPF 30. An interesting thing I want to point out is that, contrary to what you may think, there's not much of a difference between SPF 30, SPF 50, SPF 70. There's like a 1% or like a half percent difference the more you go up. So honestly, if you're using SPF 30 and reapplying throughout the day, that's probably much better than using a tiny amount of like SPF 70. So just make sure that's broad spectrum, just make sure that it's SPF 30, and make sure you're applying enough to cover your whole face and neck every day. So that is the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. I know I covered a lot of stuff, but sunscreen is something I feel very strongly about, and I feel like there's a lot of information out there, but a lot of it still needs to be presented in a more digestible and personalized format. So I kind of hope I did that at least a little. If you like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button.